Hi, everyone. This is Anne from Read It Again Bookstore in Swanee, Georgia. And I'm today with Tracy Solheim to talk about her newest book, Just for Kicks. Hi, Tracy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So let's start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I am, I guess, an author. That is actually my 13th book, Lucky 13, it turned out to be. I'm fortunate enough to have been a USA Today bestseller on a couple books. I last year was very surprised to be awarded Georgia Author of the Year in the romance category, which was really exciting. I've won a couple other awards in the writing business. I think the biggest thing that people always think is funny about me is this is actually my second career. You know, I had a career long before and never thought that, at 50 I'd publish a book, much less 13, 8 years later, and 14 and 15 in the pike. So it's kind of my second career, my Walter Mitty part of my life, I call it. I finally get to do something I really wanted to do, and kind of shocked myself that I did it on the first book, but here I am 13 books later.
That's wonderful. Before we start talking about the book, I just want to give you a personal thank you. For those of you who may or may not know, about a month ago, Read It Again had a flood. And we are temporarily located in the same shopping center, but over by Sprouts, kind of around the corner. And wanted to thank you, Tracy, because when we moved everybody there, not only for your generous donation, but the fact that you fed us for 2 days.
Well,
So
I have
thank
to say, Read It Again has been a part of this journey with me from the get-go. I mean, Kim and everybody, we hosted I think my first book signing at another friend's shop, but Kim came with all the books and everything. It's just, I don't know. Read It Again has been there since the very beginning with me. So I feel like we're all kind of a big family.
I have a quick little story. When I was interviewing to come to work at the store, Kim had asked me to give a list of my favorite authors. And when she saw that you were on there, she said, "Oh, Tracy's actually a customer." And I looked at her and like, "Are you serious? Really?" And then when I met you for the first time, I didn't even know it was you.
I know. I know.
So that's
I clean up well for these things, right?
So here, let me show the book. I absolutely loved it. And I've been reading you for years, and all of your series. I have to say though, this might be a new favorite for me.
It's it's getting so much love from so many different areas. It kind of shocked me a little bit. I know people wanted me to go back to the football, and this book has lived in my head for probably 4 years maybe. And I had got talked into writing the romantic suspense, which I don't regret at all. I had a lot of fun with those books as well, and it brought in some new readers, but I don't know, Dex and Andy's story has just been swirling for so long that it was a lot of fun to write. And I love the fact that people from all sides of the spectrum, people who like steamy or people who like sweet or whatever, are finding that it's a really good balance. And even there's a couple people, there was one review I read today, she says, "I don't even like sports, but if the Growlers were a real team, I would be their fan." So it's a lot. People who know sports like it, people who don't know sports like it. It just was a really fun, I say rom-com, but I don't know if I'm as funny as like a Susan Elizabeth Phillips or Kristen Higgins or some of those, or Avery Flynn or whatever. But it was a fun trip to write, and a fun story to get out.
Tell us a little bit about the story.
Sure. It's kind of a twist on the proposal. And what had happened was, I think, Outlander was coming out and everybody was scrambling to write a Scottish book. That's what they were wanting, a lot of the editors and readers. And I don't know, historical fiction, I love, 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 love to read it. I just don't know if I could do it as well. So I kept thinking, how can I get a Scottish, person in my book? And then I thought, well, if I do another football one, what player would be Scottish, what potential, and you look at the kickers, a lot of them, sometimes they're Spanish or they're from other countries that play soccer. And so that's kind of how I got Dex in there. And then I kind of flipped it where he was the one who needed to get married so that he didn't get deported. And then that's how kind of the marriage of convenience came in. So it's basically, a flip on the proposal. Dex, 3 days before the season or whatever, finds out he might get deported because his paperwork wasn't put in and needs to get married quickly, which was not actually, I have to tell you, the first chapter of this book was such a blast to write because it was not even in his vision that he would, get married or whatever. And at auctions, a lot of times I give away the opportunity to be a character in a book. And one of the person who won this particular time wanted to be a sports agent. So Kurt is actually a real person. And his mother, I've heard stories over time of that his mother's kind of a little off the wall because we swap stories about our parents. And so I thought, well, I'm going to run with this. And that's how, his mother got kind of this major role in the book. And she's the one who comes up with the idea for the arranged marriage and all that. So it just kind of got legs from chapter 1 and moved on from there. But it's, it's kind of a take on the proposal, and then spun my own way.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Let me just make a comment that if anybody has any questions for Tracy, please post them, and it'll show up like that, and we will answer as best we can. And Tracy, if you see something that you want to address, interrupt me, whatever the case might be, and that we can certainly address this. Now, I know that when we were talking that you said that this book was very personal for you. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, more so because this is the first book that I've actually, from soup to nuts, been in control of. Normally you write a book, your agent takes and sells it to a publishing house, which has happened with all of my other books. But this time, the romance industry, the publishing industry, when COVID hit, everything kind of slowed down, and a lot of books that were supposed to come out in the beginning part of this year got pushed to the end of the year. And then editors weren't buying as much. And then I kind of started hearing rumors editors weren't buying sports romance. And I thought, I really wanted this book out, and I really can see a potential series for it. And then I had someone in the business who is a guru, I guess we call her. She kind of helps writers get around their writer's block and kind of learn how to best use their time. And we had a long chat one day, and she said, you might want to think about doing this on your own, because I think you can. It's overwhelming, though, to publish your own book, particularly, in this market. It's flooded with romance books. I wanted to be in bookstores. I purposely made sure that it would be in print because I know I have not a great deal of print readers, but quite a few. And so there was a lot to learn. It wasn't just writing the book. And I think when we got to publication, I was just so worried about that I hadn't done any of the publishing part of it right. I wasn't as worried about the book. So that's why I think I was just so overwhelmed with the praise for the book. I was just, when I published it, I was happy. Oh, I got it out. I don't care if people like it or not. I got through the whole process and I figured out how to do it, and I can do it from now on if I want to, or I can sell to a publishing house if I want to, or whatever. And so, like I said, I was kind of bowled over when it got such a warm reception and a big reception from readers and bloggers and reviewers. They were interested in reading it, even though I did it myself. So I think that it's a journey. It was a very big journey. But as my husband said,
do you think that you would do it again? I mean,
yeah, I've got one coming out in October. There are 2 more in this series. I probably will. I have already had someone. I probably shouldn't say this, but other people have reached out to me as wanting to publish another series from me already. But I'm going to wait and see. I do have something that I probably would sell to a publishing house because it's a little more women's fiction-y. I won't be able to write that for probably another 18 months. I've got, 4 books in the pipeline that are almost, one to finish a series that I published with Penguin. There's a couple one brother and a sister are still hanging out there that haven't had their stories. And I've had people begging for them for a while. So that one's coming out at Christmas time. And then we'll come behind it with the 2 more Milwaukee Prowlers stories. And then after that, I may I have this women's fiction thing that's been on the back burner for a while. Another one that I think will be so fun to write, and it's about women in their 40s, three sorority sisters, and their three journeys. They have different life experience, but it's more about, the friendship between the three of them. And I think that's more geared towards a major publishing house, what they're looking for right now. So it's funny because the trends change, and the timeline from when you write a book to when it's published to when it's in the store can sometimes be 18 months when you're with a publisher. But when you're doing it on your own, some people do it in a matter of months. I don't. I like to have it all reviewed, to have it, edited by multiple people because I make a lot of mistakes. And I just, again, wanted it to be in bookstores. So that takes a little more time as well. So it's a different journey for every author. But this, it's at the point I am in my career, I'm just happy just chugging along and having fun with writing the books. So.
And I think the reviews that you've been getting are wonderful. One thing that I was commenting to you before we went live was we've sold out of your books. They were sitting out front, and I went in to work one day and looked over at my shelf of my picks. I'm like, where's Tracy's book? So that's just wonderful. Yeah. So one question that I had for you that you pretty much touched on is, is there a genre that you want to go to? And I think I heard you kind of say the historical.
Well, fiction. I have the women's fiction kind of in the pike, but that's kind of the same as romance because they will have a romantic element. But again, it's more women's fiction. The distinction is you don't always have a happily ever after at the end. It's more about the journey of the woman that they will feel self-actualized at the end. So that's kind of the difference between the two. I would love to do a historical fiction, and I always say this, that my time period would be early 1700s in Boston, before the Revolutionary War with, kind of the, British and the colonies and spies and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. And I read a lot of historical fiction during that time period. So I don't know if I ever do it, that's probably where I would fit in. I think I say that now, but that's the time period that would be most interesting to me.
That's great. So you sent me a little care package, and in the care package was this beautiful soap that I think I am not going to unwrap. I'm going to display right next to the book. So in this story, talk about this soap, and where Andy kind of takes it. Yeah.
So Andy, the reason she agrees, well, actually, and this is a lot of fun because, again, this is a book about a marriage of convenience, which can be really hard to write during, present day. Is there really ever a marriage of convenience, during present day? But in this circumstance, Andy finds herself, her deadbeat boyfriend has taken out loans in her name, student loans, and she's trying to slowly graduate get through college, paying it all on her own, working during the day and taking a couple classes every semester. And it's taken her 6 or 7, 8 years to get through. And she's almost done. And then all of a sudden she finds out she's got $70,000 of student debt that she had no idea she had. So that's how she ends up in the attorney's office. She's asking him for help. And then Dex comes in at the beginning. And Andy, her goal once she finishes college is she's a young entrepreneur and she wants to start a company with organic soaps and lotions and things like that. So the football bath bombs, when she ends up married to Dex, she doesn't even know a lot about football, and she ends up going to the game, and there's a lot of interaction with what they call the WAGs, the wives and girlfriends, and it can be a little cutthroat. I have 2 friends.
I love that.
Yeah, I have 2 friends, one who's married to a former professional football player, and she was like, oh yeah. And then another friend whose daughter is married to a current professional baseball player. And she was like, oh, yep, this can really happen. So there's a lot of pressure on poor Annie. She doesn't know how she fits in. And again, she was kind of grew up on the foster system. She's kind of doesn't have any family, doesn't have any, reference points for how she should behave in certain situations. And so anyway, she gets kind of conned in by one of the WAGs into making bath soaps or bath bombs, I guess, for giveaways for this big charity event. She thinks it's only going to be like maybe 100. It ends up to be several thousand or several hundred, I think what it was. But anyway, so that's where they came from. I thought this is terrible. I always think about, okay, what would be a really good giveaway? When I wrote Recipe for Disaster, I remember the publishing house was like, oh, this is going to sound like a cookbook. I don't think we should do this. It's a suspense book. But all I could see was the little recipe, the measuring spoons I wanted to give away. Brenda Novak had did that at an event, and it was funny. We were both up for the same award 2 years ago, I think, for both of our books. And I told her, she ended up winning, of course, because she's fabulous. But I told her she was the one who got me into romantic suspense and got me to write the actual book that we were both competing for, because I wanted, the spoons. And she always thinks that's funny. Her spoons were better than mine too, so we won't even talk about that. My son stole it, so that's why I was like, I got to get more spoons. So
was there when you were writing it, and I loved the part in the book where she gets everybody together to help make all of this for the gala. Absolutely loved it. Was there a certain part in the book that you were like, okay, that's my favorite part of the book?
I think I really loved the part where they go to the picnic. And again, so even though this is a new series, the head coach and his wife have their own little novella book in the old series. So I brought in the Baltimore Blaze series. So it's a different team in a different city, but I brought them into this book. And I loved, there's a scene where Andy interacts with Merritt, the coach's wife, who in her book, she's a CPA. And that's how she's a CPA for the team. In Baltimore, and comes face to face with someone who did her wrong in college, who is now her husband. But anyway, so it's like a second chance thing, and you get to kind of re-engage with them in this book. Characters it's 4 years later, something like that, 5 years later. But there's a scene where Merritt, and this stands out to me because my editor stopped in the middle and called me, where Andy, she's done everything on her own for her entire life. She's really tried not to depend on anybody because everybody's always let her down, even, the deadbeat boyfriend stealing the money. And here she is, the coach's wife has befriended her. And actually it's the coach's little daughter is glommed onto her, and all the wags have kind of turned her away and everything. And the she's talking about, that she's got to, take this really hard class, and it's accounting, and she goes, it's not what I want. It's the last one. I saved it to the end because I knew it was going to be hard, and it's not my wheelhouse. And Merritt says, well, today's your lucky day. I'm a CPA. I'm going to help you. And I remember my editor, she literally texted me in the middle. She goes, I'm crying. And I said, why? And she said, because this is the one thing, this poor woman has been on her own for so long. And you see it through the beginning part of the book, how she's had to struggle to kind of make things work. But she never gets down about it. And here's this woman saying, I'm going to help you. And no one's ever really done that for her before. So I think once I reread it, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of do like that scene. It was finally a turning point for Andy, that she didn't have to grovel for everything and work by herself, that there really were opportunities and people to help her. So
yeah, that's now, how do you celebrate the release of a book? I mean, obviously you've said that you've got stuff in the pipeline, but relax a little, or?
This one's been hard. Well, because again, everything I was doing on my own, and I was just I didn't know what the numbers were going to look like. And the best part, I guess, about publishing on your own is you can see the numbers right away. You can look where they're selling on every site, and I can even see on Ingram who's bought them and how many and whatever. I don't know. I think this time I celebrated a little more than I normally would, just personally, because I felt like, again, it was a bigger accomplishment doing it on my own. But I usually give myself, when I finish a book, which, this book got finished in October, I usually give myself 2 weeks off, and then I have to start writing the next book. This time it ended up being about 2 months because, again, there was a learning curve for, how do I advertise? How do I get reviews? How do I, publish this, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just, unfortunately, the Christmas book that's due in October, I wanted it to be done by now. I'm going to have to spend 4 really hard weeks in this chair to finish it, but it's still on track to be finished on time, but I just wanted to be further along. So
how long does it usually take you from beginning plot to publication?
Well, it depends. Again, when I was with a publisher, if you're in one of the big five, I started out with Penguin, and again, that could be a year to a year and a half. It may take you 3 months to write it, and then it's another 12 to 15 months in their pipeline. When I was with a small press, it, again, 3 months to write 90,000 words. If I'm religious about it, I give myself 5 because life happens. I'm in a life happens moment now with my mom, and it's just, you kind of have to figure in things are going to derail you in the middle. Hopefully not the book, but that's happened to me once before. And then they would turn around in about 3 to 4 months. And that's the same thing with this. I finished it in October. I probably could have put it out in January, but I really wanted, again, to take the time to figure out, I wanted people to review it. I wanted to give it a little buzz because, that's normally what a publishing house would do. So I, finished in October and it came out in March. Then this one will finish probably, hopefully by June 1st with everything, editing and all that kind of stuff. I'm not releasing it until October because, again, it's a holiday book, and I'm trying to keep them 6 months apart. And then the next Growlers book will probably come out 4 months after that because I'm thinking I want to do it or release it around the Super Bowl to try to get a little more football buzz and things like that. And that's what a lot of people, when you're writing a book, you just want to write the book, but I have to think a little more big picture now because I'm, want to figure out how you're going to promote it and what makes sense. What can you dovetail into? And so I think to try to get that one out around the Super Bowl would be better.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say, so we have this in our front right by the checkout counter. And I really think that this had something to do with why we sold out. So tell me about this fabulous cover.
Well, and it's that was one of the bigger things I agonized over. So, when I first was with Penguin and my first football books came out, again, the first 3 or 4, I think, were shirtless guys on the cover. And then the last one is about the owner. So he's got a blazer on or some, a suit and tie. And then when I got the rights back and republished them myself, I put couples on there because I was trying to reach a different group. Some people, they pick up the shirtless guy and they think, oh, this is going to be a really hot, sexy read. I don't put mine kind of to that side. There may be, out of 300 pages, there may be 12, 15, not even that, I think, that are intimate scenes. And we could talk about that too, why those are in there. Those are, I think, very necessary to a story if they're done right, because your characters are their most vulnerable when they're in an intimate situation, and you can unwrap layers of them when you're in their point of view and move the story along. Sex scenes just for sex scenes don't work in my books. Some people do. They're there for a reason, and I hope I do them well. So anyway, when we were talking about the covers, I remember putting this on Facebook, I think in my private street group, and I think I even put it on my author page, and I said, do you like the covers that are out now are, the illustrated covers? And my daughter, who she's more hip than I am, she's 23, I kept saying, what should I do? And she says, oh no, you got to do the illustrated cover. That's what's selling, that's what everybody's doing. But I really did a lot of research on the market, and I spent probably 2 weeks, and I found that the ones that were selling the most for sports romance and for this genre were the shirtless guys or the hunky guy on the cover. So we went with that, and that was my vision, was a guy in a kilt in the stadium. So Lee Hyatt is my cover designer, and she did a great job with it, and we kind of ran with it. And again, this was before it was coming out. This was one of my really angsty moments. Did I pick the right cover? Because if you look around your store too, in the big trade paperback, what's selling are those illustrated covers. Mm-hmm. So I was concerned with that, but it's well received. And so we're going to keep going with that with the rest of the series, because you want to have a branded look. Now, my small town series, where the Christmas book is coming out, it won't be like that. It'll just have the inn, because these all take place in a bed and breakfast in North Carolina. And it will just have the inn and possibly a couple on it. The other 2 have a couple on it, but I might not this time. I might have, there's a dog in the story. We might just put a dog on there. Dogs sell well, cats sell well, and babies sell well, as I found out.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I love the cover, because as I'm looking at it, this is what concerned me. And then I love how when the book starts, that he's immediately teased for
about the kill.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, it's funny because one reviewer, and this woman, I loved her review because she hit on two things that, um, yeah, I probably should have been paid a little more attention to. One, the stereotypical of the wicked friend who tries to cause trouble, and she still gave it 5 stars, which is even funnier. But she said, that I use too many stereotypes for Dex as well, with the kilts and the brogue and the bagpipes, and his thing. But I think with that, I did that purposely because, again, he wants to go home to Scotland. There's a
Right.
reason he can't go home to Scotland, and he really misses his homeland. So, the picture of the castle and the bagpipes and the kilt and everything, even though he doesn't like wearing it for the photo ops, those are still things he's not ready to give up with. So that part, I kind of could defend. So I thought it was fun to have all that in there. I wanted them to be spend a little more time in Scotland, but the book was getting a little long, and I had to kind of abbreviate it. And plus, COVID took away my trip to Scotland, so it all would have been, Google images and where I could go on little Google tour. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Declan, and that it gets to be almost 3/4 of the book before you release what was so horrible. He didn't want to return, and kept me guessing. I'm like reading, going, when are you going to tell me what's going on? I love the fact that he kept me guessing as to what he did. Why'd you make me wait so long?
Well, I think, I don't know. I'm one of those, I didn't want to give away the store at the very beginning and all the backstory. I think you kind of know something happened somewhere that's kept him apart, and you don't really know who Neil is. Is it a brother? Is it, a friend or whatever? Is it how close they are? I just wanted the reader to kind of get to know him first and really like him first before I kind of drop that bomb. And then you kind of turn around at the end and you see the spin. Well, it really wasn't as bad as he's perceiving it, but again, it was a huge loss for him.
Right.
And things were said that could never be taken back. And sure, everybody says don't write something that could be cleared up with a conversation, but it couldn't at that time be cleared up with a conversation. 10 years later, Neil's wife has kind of come around to things and, regrets things she accused him of. And so it all worked out in the end. But I like drying it out a little bit so the reader could just get to know Dex and know that something's really weighing heavy on him, but he is paying penance in multiple ways, whether, he's helping the mathletes, or he's, helping in the children's center, or, he's hanging out in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and not going home, So,
yeah, I like the way that you made him an all-around good guy. I mean, it just wasn't, he was a football player. That's all he did. He did help out. And I really like that when the family, and I don't want to give it away too much, but that when they did get together, that those two people had a good conversation. Felt okay.
Right.
Not really relieved, because he still had guilt.
There's still guilt.
He came to a closing, if you will, of his feelings, and was able and mature enough to kind of move on from that.
Yeah.
I really liked that part of the book. So tell me, why did you have Dex in the story? He's this brilliant MIT math whiz that totally threw me for a loop. And then you utilize his skill with playing blackjack and doing very well with that. I had told you earlier that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Where did that whole idea come from?
Well, part of that is a true story. So I read, Derek Jeter has a blog, and he's had it for probably 10 years, the Players Tribune. And every day I get like a little blog, alert. And some days something looks interesting, I'll read it. And a lot of it is athletes who are writing about their life and, their life out of sports most of the time, but some in sports. And one day there was this blog from a Baltimore Ravens football player who is also an MIT grad. And he works with children in Baltimore who they're disadvantaged. They don't have the resources to get math help and things like that. And so that always stuck in my head that I was always going to do that. And again, Dex ends up, he's fleeing from Scotland from this major event that happened in his life. And so again, he's not the one who was supposed to be the professional star athlete. It was Neil. And he comes over to the United States on a math scholarship, to work, and then gets kind of talked into being the kicker on the Wisconsin team. And it all kind of rolls from there. So I really wanted the story to be that he was never really and had ever dreamed of being a professional athlete, much less a huge star in a sport that he knew nothing about or knew about, but, never played. That his focus was always on, he's the son of teachers and always, a math person. And so then there was this other movie, I can't even remember the name of it now, that I was watching. And it was basically the same thing. It was a guy who was like really smart at math and was counting cards. And it's not that Dex is counting cards. He's doing the probability of what cards can be there and what can be played well. And it's people who have just really serious math chops. And the whole thing about, this whole arranged marriage, I love they go to Las Vegas, obviously, because it's faster and they could be done under the radar, and ends up they don't get under the radar. But I purposely wanted it in Las Vegas because that's where Andy's boyfriend goes with the money. He thinks he's a card shark. Well, turns out he's not, and Dex is. I really wanted her to not be forced into marrying him. So, and I'll give some of it away, but, Dex wins this money and gives it to her. Like, okay, you're out of debt. I'll find someone else. Don't get stuck with this. And she ends up, saying, no, wait a minute, I'm going to go ahead and go through with this because I committed to it. And really the only reason she goes to Las Vegas is to find deadbeat Kenny and call him out and try to find her money back. So I kind of wanted that scene where there was a way she gets her money, and that was the quickest way for him to give it to him. He's not giving her his money. He's giving her winnings, so it made the whole idea of the arranged marriage moot. She could walk away if she wanted to, and he could figure something out. He still had 3 days and probably could pay it off somewhere. It was just kind of a knee-jerk thing for them to go to Vegas and get married. And so the choice was back on hers to say, no, I'm going to go through with this. You help me, I'm going to help you. And that's really why I wanted them to go to Vegas and do that. So, and then have the crazy wedding.
Well, and that's my next question. Is that, okay, so you go to Vegas and you're thinking you're going to run into Elvis. You totally throw the Star Wars in.
Right. Because you were thinking you were going to run into Elvis.
Right, exactly.
Done it before. Why would I do that? So I really wanted to do something. Yeah, I wanted to do something really fun and crazy. And the Star Wars thing, I was just kind of researching one day, and you're going through and you're finding all this stuff. And I saw these crazy Star Wars wedding, and I'm thinking this would be fun because it's totally not in either of their personalities, right? And it's not Elvis, because if I had done Elvis, that's what you would have expected. So I had a lot of fun with that. I watched a couple of weddings. Some of the vows I had to write to people and say, is it okay if I take this line or this line? And they were like, oh, this would be funny, So some of the vows were actually, I think it was the one line where she's, I forget, where Princess Leia says something about not man and wife, but whatever, king and queen or something, which goes on, I think, through the whole thing. But that was fun because I think if I had done Elvis, you would have said, oh yeah, everybody Elvis. Yeah. I wanted to do something that would really kind of pull the reader back into the story and say, hey, wait a minute, this is kind of new.
Yeah, so, I really like that. That was a nice twist on going to Vegas and
so. It was just fun. And there, I love where Dex is always, he's got a sister younger, I think 7 or 8 years younger. She's younger even than Andy. And he's just assuming, well, you've always dreamt of a wedding. She's like, well, no, the girls in my situation don't dream of big weddings. This would be it. This is kind of cool. Here's Chewbacca, and he's like, wow, she thinks this is fun. So it was kind of a fun thing to do.
Yeah. I really liked the character development of both of them. They just, Well, I'm not going to give it away.
Yeah.
I just like how things ended up very
Yeah.
much so. So tell me, what are you currently reading these days? Or what
Um,
do you want to read? What's on your bookshelf that you know, are getting ready to read?
well, our book club just did, is Elizabeth Lett, Finding Dorothy.
Yes.
My daughter just read that one too. And that's been the best part of this COVID thing. She's become like the most avid reader and actually gotten into romance, which she never read. I don't know if she's ever
Oh.
read my books. And I don't expect her to, but we read a lot of similar books. So she actually just finished that one today, I think, and we're going to go and watch Judy tonight, I think. But what's her next one? Oh gosh, it's Gilbert who wrote, oh my gosh, not Girls in Translation, and not City of Girls. That's what it is.
Oh,
So that's
okay.
reading
Okay.
next.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was something else that was coming out this week. Oh, I think Lorraine Heath has a historical romance coming out. So when I'm writing, I really try not to read contemporary romance, and I know I'm going to be writing for the next 6 months. So it'll be a while before, although no, I shouldn't say that. I think there's a new bromance book coming out soon. I'll probably read that one. And Taylor Jenkins Reid, she has a new one coming out, but I don't think that's till June. I think my daughter has it like all lined out, what we're taking to the beach, what we're not taking to the beach to read. But, Henry, I can't remember her first name, who wrote Beach Read.
Emily?
Emily. Yeah, she's got one coming out too, I think. So, and that book, I laughed, and my daughter picked that one up first. And we were at the beach, and she was laughing hysterically. She kept looking at me. I'm like, "Why are you looking at me?" So then she says, "You have to read this book." And to read a book about a romance author, and some of the lines that she says, I know I've said before. So she's really, she's having terrible writer's block, and again, she's got a whole life happening thing swirling around her too. And, the one line about it'll be easier to birth a baby than write this book. And my husband was laughing when I was reading it to him. He goes, "I swear you've said that at least twice." And I said, "Yeah, I probably have." So it's just, it's a lot of fun to read some of that stuff.
Yeah. So recap for me what is coming out.
Okay.
So, and when is it coming out so that we all know?
It's called A Second Chance Christmas for right now. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the title we're going to go with. I have to go. And again, that's part of the research. Are there a million more books with that, title out there? And I try to be really careful with that. It is the third book in what is called the Second Chances series. I think the first one was Back to Before, and then All They Ever Wanted. And it's a big family, the McAllister family
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny because my beta reader, she goes, "Did you watch the Bridgertons before you wrote this?" She goes, "Because this family is really starting to resemble them." I said, "Wow. Dude, they were here 7 years ago."
Right. Before all of Bridgerton.
Right. But it is. I mean, especially in this one. This is the third brother. Ryan comes home, and he's going through some things, and he's the big baseball star, but really he doesn't feel like he's the star in the family because every one of those kids are uber talented and have something going on. And he usually doesn't stay at Christmas time. He usually kind of bounces into town and bounces back. He doesn't like to stay for a long period, but the two brothers who the other two books about are having a double wedding on New Year's. So I had a lot of readers going, "When do they get married?" Because they both had Happily for Now. I no, actually, that's not right. They did both get engaged in the second book. Anyway, so their wedding is going to be New Year's Eve. So Ryan is kind of stuck in town, and he is another one who wants nothing to do with the town because he was involved in the whole Ponzi scheme thing by accident. Because again, he was trying to do one up his brothers and try to be the smart one and not the dumb jock. And he gets, everybody involved in this Ponzi scheme that, where half the town loses money and everything. So he's embarrassed and doesn't want to come back. And his mom, of course, is over the top with the Christmas stuff. And there's a lot of Christmas things in there. And he gets involved helping out one of his older sister's friend, who this woman used to tutor him when she was in high school and he was in middle school. So it's a younger man, older woman romance. And she's a widow and has a young son who has he's acting out or whatever. I think he's 6 or 7. He's the same age as Ryan's niece. And anyway, he needs some looking after, and everybody's looking for someone to look after this kid. And Ryan's like, "I got nothing to do. I'll do it." And his whole thing in life is no one thinks he can do anything but play baseball. So no one expects anything out of Ryan. And he's kind of at the end of his career and trying to figure out what he wants to do with himself. And no one expects anything. So it's a fun Christmas romp, but it's going to be, I think, a little emotional for him and his journey. And then after that, we have another Growlers book. It will definitely be either Trey or Luke, obviously, because I put them in there. And both of their stories are floating around in my head and kind of going back and forth. So I can't decide which one will be first. I thought it was going to be Trey, but a couple things jumped in my head at the end of football season with Luke that could potentially work really well early on. Trey's story is going to be Trey's a deep character, and actually that will be my first book where I'm writing a female character who is disabled, or I shouldn't say that, she's like me but a little worse than me with blind, vision issues. She's partially, most of the way blind. And so that one's, I'm working with the School for the Blind downtown or the Center for Sight, and just kind of learning how different things go for someone who wants to live independently and has low vision, and, talking to them about relationships and how they find, do they date sighted people or not, because several of them don't. It's really funny. So that's kind of, I'm researching both of those stories, and I'm not sure which one, once I finish this one, by June 15th, I have to figure out which one I'm writing, because that's when I have to start writing it. But both of them have pretty good stories. And then there is still a character hanging on from the Baltimore Blaze books that I get more email about, Charlotte from Sleeping with the Enemy, the younger sister. Mm-hmm. And I do have a really good story for her. But I just can't decide whether she'll be with someone on the Growlers or someone in Baltimore. So we'll see. We'll see. And that may be a Christmas one not this year, but next year. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Oh, yeah. I'm so excited.
I know, if I could write, I am a slow writer. I know people who could just crank out books, and they do such a great job, and they're really, Jillian Neal, oh my gosh, she writes so quickly when she's, sitting down to write it, and she writes such fabulous books. I'm slow. I don't know how much of it is the vision part or just how much of it is I used to be in writing testimony and newspaper articles and magazine articles, and your first draft better be your final draft. And so I tend to not write a million drafts. Once I'm done, I'm pretty much done with it, unless an editor says, okay, this is ridiculous, you have to change it, which I've only had happen once with one chapter in a book. I try to, but it just takes me longer. Right. So, and there's not a lot of input on the front end from anybody else but me. So
yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely. Well, thank you for talking to us. And certainly, since you are a customer of Read It Again, I hope that I can say that if you come to Read It Again and purchase the books, that perhaps you could even have them signed by Tracy.
Yeah. Oh, I'm happy. I'm happy to come over and get them signed.
That would be wonderful. And best of luck with the rest of your writing, and hopefully next time you have a book come out, maybe you do it in person, maybe.
Wouldn't that be fun? Fingers crossed. I'm ready. That's one of the things I miss is seeing readers. We've missed so many reader events in the last year, and seeing other authors in my tribe, it's great doing this. I'm glad that we're able to do this, but I just miss just seeing readers and signing books and chatting with them, so.
Right. So everybody keep in mind that we are temporarily in a different location, same shopping center right next door to Sprouts. We are open to the public, and we can certainly order books for you if we don't have them. So
I ordered 3 today.
Yay! So have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you again for your time. And I absolutely love this book.
Thank you. I'm
really excited that you're coming with more.
I'm coming slow, but they're coming.
Hey, I'm willing to wait.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it.
All right.